Project Farstar, the exploration and colonization program created in 2547, designed to establish the most distant human colony in history, resulting in the discovery of Tiba, Vega, and Virgil, with the latter two subsequently colonized. The Orion system was the farthest human world discovered under Project Farstar in 2650. It had one sole habitable planet, Orion 3, renamed Armitage by the explorers. Despite there being nothing noteworthy about this planet, Armitage was colonized in the 2660s and quickly became a bustling hub of activity. All was relatively peaceful. That was until 2681. Unbeknown to the UEE, the Banu and Xi'an had suffered a number of raids to their systems, and now, it appeared, it was our turn. On August 9th, the Dell Township on Armitage was the scene of a violent attack. 638 people killed, almost the entire colony. To this day, just one man remains unaccounted for. It was a seemingly senseless and brutal attack that came without any warning. There had been no signs of any other species in the area. What was most puzzling, perhaps, was that valuable items were left behind in the wake of devastation, whilst more worthless items with much lower value had been scavenged by the invaders. The UEE deployed researchers to assess this new threat. They determined that these were the actions of a truly violent race. This was the Vanduul. Research indicated that the Vanduul often revisited past areas that they had identified to be of use to them. It was speculated that this is why Armitage had been targeted. Whilst they had not colonised the planet, in fact, they had only set foot on the place once in the previous century, they still considered Armitage their world. Over time, the UEE learned more about the Vanduul. They were scavengers. Despite their violent introduction to the UEE, they weren't looking for war, nor did they want permanent land. They are driven by the search for resources over kill tallies. They behave like classic hunter-gatherers with a very distinct style. Eliminate the threat, raid the occupied planet, and once the resources have dried up, move to a new location. This was indicative of a nomadic species, one with no desire to find a place to call home. This sentient nomadic living species of bipedal aliens form hordes to crew their ships. Each horde has its own set of rules, customs, and laws, overseen by the chieftain. There is little communication between the different clans of the Vandal race, but there is one thing they have in common. A strange tradition that gives some insight into the inner workings of the Vanduul. Once a child reaches adulthood, they are banished from their family. They will receive no money, housing, or support of any kind, except one thing: a knife. The knife is fashioned by the young Vanduul's parents, and as the only item in their possession, it is treasured for the rest of their lives. In fact, the symbolic nature of the knife can be seen across most of Vandal society. Knife imagery appears throughout their media. Elaborate stained glass images of knives have been discovered, and even Vandal ships are directly inspired by the shapes of their daggers. The Vanduul see every achievement they make in adulthood as the result of having the knife at the start of their journey. Perhaps this explains why they are so comfortable with the use of violence and destruction to survive. It certainly helps place emphasis of Vandal culture on self-reliance over religion. The admiration of a specific person and their achievements is far more likely than the worship of a higher or more spiritual power. DNA analysis of captured hordes show that they have a wide range of genetic diversity within each group. So, despite their lack of cohesion as a species, there is some interaction between hordes. Intriguingly, the analysis also shows that hordes consist solely of males. This means that there must be somewhere in the verse the Vanduul call home. Somewhere where their female and young are safely based. Despite their somewhat barbaric nature, the Vanduul should not be underestimated or seen as an unintelligent species. They learn and adapt, taking knowledge from each planet they raid and every species they encounter. They don't create their technology, they take it from other races and do what they want with it for their own desires. In battle, they have shown a confidence not seen before in an alien species. Their ability to strategize was gravely underestimated, as they quickly learned to attack high-value buildings such as medical facilities and comm stations first, to minimize the chance of resistance. It's easy to think that only humanity would be able to draft such a complex battle plan, and even more surprising that it came from a species more likely to shoot first and ignore the consequences. The Vanduul are capable of communicating verbally as well as visually through hand gestures and changing the colour of their bodies according to their mood. Whilst clearly capable of communicating, none of the individual hordes have offered anything but hostility to the UEE. That being said, it is possible for a singular human to establish trade with the Vanduul, but let this be at your own risk. Transactions should be purely business, and we must be mindful that there is, as of yet, no commonly accepted guidelines or protection when engaging in Vanduul trade. Whilst the Vanduul are hostile towards the UEE, some hordes will trade with Banu planet states, and there are some very fragile trading relations with the Xi'an. Relations with the Vanduul haven't improved since that first brutal contact. In just 6 months since the first attack, outposts throughout the Orion system had been raided 15 times, and all attempts at peaceful contact proved unsuccessful. They decimated UEE fleets across the Orion system with antimatter bombs, causing the UEE to abandon the system. This is exactly what the Vanduul wanted. They were now able to harvest the resources of the planet within, with no interference. They did the same to the Virgil system, and after a notable absence at the opening of the Ark in 2806, the Caliban system received the same devastating treatment in 2871. They had so far refused all attempts to stop the violence and open diplomatic relations. For over 250 years, millions of soldiers and civilians fell to the forces of the Vanduul. 3 UEE-controlled systems have been lost to the Vanduul, and the attacks were growing in frequency. They were now a real and impending threat to the UEE. Then, there was silence. It didn't last. Attacks resumed in 2945, and this time the UEE said no more. The Senate formally declared interspecies war on the Vanduul. From now on, as far as the UEE are concerned, the Vanduul's only desire is the destruction of humanity. This was the start of the Vandal War. The first public known offensive of the UEE in the Vandal War was Operation Mandrake in March 2946. It ended with the occupation of the Oberon system by UEE forces. It was the first time in our history that major victory had been scored against a medium-sized Vandal clan. Perhaps we could have hope. Perhaps now the tide was beginning to turn. If there's one thing the Vanduul have taught us, it's that without victory, there can be no survival.
Thank you very much for watching. In this series, we are covering the history of the alien races in Star Citizen and humanity's encounters with them. We've touched upon some historic events that happened in our history here. However, if you would like to know more about these events and more about our long and storied history inside the verse, then please consider checking out the Time Capsule series, where this is covered in much more detail. All the links to everything I talk about in this video will be linked in the video description. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the verse.